Here we go with another episode of the Friday Five. So we'll jump right into mortgage rates, national averages from Mortgage News Daily, as I use weekly. The conventional 30-year fixed rate, as of today, 7.05%. FHA 30-year fixed, 6.46%. VA 6.48%. And all of those are improvements by a little bit from last week, basically down probably like 0.05% to somewhere around 0.1%. All right, number two, Barry Habib is an individual who has been in the mortgage space for a couple decades, very well respected, and he runs a website called MBS Highway, Mortgage-Backed Securities Highway. They provide current time data on where mortgage-backed securities are trading, and they also offer some information on what's impacting rates, and they do a little bit of forecasting on where they think rates are going. So yesterday, Barry published on his website a letter to President Trump pointing out that he believes the shelter component of two inflation reports, the core PCE and the CPI report, that those data points are flawed because it isn't including current information when it relates to the shelter component. So that information is basically a month to 2 months old, and therefore the output inflation numbers aren't accurate. So what the Fed is looking at from PCE and CPI, those numbers aren't accurate because they're outdated. So, and he points to more current data points from either CoreLogic, Apartment List, Realtor.com, or Zillow that they could use those instead. And the shelter component of the equation for both inflation reports would be much lower. So more like 1.5%, that shelter component of the formula versus 4.6 to 4.8%. So right now, core PCE currently sits at 2.8%. CPI sits at 3.25%, and the Fed's target for both of those is 2%. If they use the more recent data points from CoreLogic, Apartment List, Realtor.com, or Zillow, then the core PCE right now, instead of being 2.8, would be 2.2%, and CPI, instead of being 3.25%, would be 1.8%, actually below the Fed's target of 2% for inflation. So what does all this mean? So basically, if the Fed doesn't realize that a major part of their inflation formula is wrong, then they're creating monetary policy that's based on outdated info, and they might not be making the right decision by staying neutral with rates instead of cutting rates. Obviously, the data is going to catch up because it's only a month to 2 months behind, but the Fed could get caught behind the eight ball, just like they did when inflation was starting to rise and they thought it was transitory, and they may end up chasing their tails a little bit with it. So, big picture, I'm hopeful or optimistic, I guess I should say, that inflation is closer to the 2% target that they want and that their data is just a little outdated. And I'm also optimistic that that could lead to better mortgage rates in 2025. Probably not until Q2, but it might not be too far away. And I think it would be, pretty impactful if mortgage rates were in the mid to low sixes, and the fives would, I think, just pour gasoline on the number of real estate transactions that would happen. And I think that would really help inventory numbers too. All right, number three, did you know that you may be able to use your 401k to help you with funds needed to buy a house? Most employers allow you access to usually up to 50% of the balance in your 401k, up to $50,000 a lot of times. That's usually the max. And you can take that as a loan, not a withdrawal, but a loan. You can loan it to yourself, and then you pay it back through automatic deduction on your pay stub, but you pay it back to yourself with interest. Most employers allow that. It can be a great way to have some additional funds to be able to use to buy a home, especially if you're tight on funds. Now, some financial advisors will advise against it. Downside can be if you leave that job, whatever the balance is on the 401k loan instantly becomes a liquidation that you're going to be taxed on. So that can definitely be the downside. But if you're tight on funds and you just don't have any other options, it can be a really good way to have sufficient funds to buy a house. Number four, there also are lots of grant and down payment assistance programs that are available. We have one through Fannie Mae. We have one through Freddie Mac. There's also county programs, Pennsylvania Housing State Bond Program has a down payment assistance program. And there's just a lot of options out there. Most of them do have some type of income limit. And also, sometimes you have to be a first-time home buyer. But there are some of those options out there available to you. If you have questions, we can give you details on all of those programs, so just reach out. Lastly, number 5, the thought of the week. So I picked this up from James Clear. Gosh, I really like the guy, so sorry if I reference to him a lot. But he kind of borrowed this from Pareto's principle. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. It's essentially an 80-20 rule, but he's adapting it to lifestyle in 4 different areas. So the first area being relationships. And he says, spend time with the few people that have the most positive impact on your life. So spend 80% of your time with that 20% of people that really have a positive impact on your life. Priorities, focus on the few actions that yield the most positive impact on your day. So spend 80% of your time on those 20% priorities that really positively impact your day. And then learning, focus on the few info sources that foster the most knowledge. So again, 20% sources of income, 80% of your time in those. And then stress, eliminate the few sources, those 20% sources that cause 80% of the stress and friction in your life. And those are four ideas to help you live your best life. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. Please reach out to me if I can help you in any way.